It is Oliver Friesen, the CEO of Golden Metal Resources, and today I'm going to provide a quick technical breakdown of the recently announced IP geophysical results from our flagship Pilot Mountain project. So what you're looking at now is an outline of the Pilot Mountain project, and I'm going to zoom in slightly here. So here's the main access road coming from the town of Mena, Nevada. And then all of these smaller trails that you see here are various dirt roads, access pathways that you see to the four main mineralized zones that are currently located and found at our Pilot Mountain project. So the majority of the in-ground resources right now at Pilot Mountain, about 85% of the 12.53 million tons of resources are currently hosted at the Desert Scheelite Zone. We also have the Good Hope Zone located approximately 1.3, 1.4 kilometers to the north. And then to the northwest, we have the Garnet and Gunmetal zones. So when we acquired this project, the belief was that there was a much larger and coherent exploration story to be uncovered. Reason for that being at these four quote unquote satellite or isolated deposit areas, the mineralization and alteration that we're seeing there is almost identical across the property. So what that tells us is that there's more likely than not one larger heat engine that is providing the fluid flow that you're seeing at the property. And then the exploration is focused on these four areas. However, as mentioned, there's potentially a combination, there's some sort of coherence to these systems at depth. So that's what we looked to set out when we did the 2022-2023 high resolution IP geophysics. The area that we focused on was in between these four deposit areas, in between Good Hope and Desert Scheelite, and then the area east of Desert Scheelite was looked at mainly in a previous IP survey done back in 2012, which we've now reinterpreted with our geophysicists. So the results that we presented today identified three very high priority exploration targets on top of what we currently have at Pilot Mountain. The first of those zones is the Desert Scheelite Parallel West Zone, and that's this outline here. I'm going to just highlight them on the actual map here in plan view, and then we're going to look at each of these different zones in a bit more detail. I'm just going to zoom in here. You'll see the Desert Scheelite Zone represents this main body here. All of these tracks that you see in the background represent drill trails and things like that. This Desert Scheelite Parallel West Zone, as you can see, there's been no drill sites here. This is a brand new discovery, which we're very excited about. We also have the Desert Scheelite East Extension Zone. We'll go into a bit more detail as to what we're seeing there and why we're excited about the exploration potential there. And then we have the Porphyry Depth Zone, which I've outlined approximately here, which effectively is the first time we've ever seen the Good Hope and Desert Scheelite zones connected up in the subsurface, which is a very exciting development. The reason for that is because skarn type systems, which is what we find at Pilot Mountain, are always associated with a porphyry intrusion or a porphyry deposit at depth. And the porphyry is the main driver of mineralizing fluid flow across the property, with the skarn actual mineralization and alteration being associated with where that porphyry intersects your limestone or carbonate units. So it's a bit of a technical story, but the reality is whenever you see skarn type mineralization, what you're looking for ultimately is a causative porphyry, which is your main driver of fluid flow, because that porphyry can lead to a porphyry deposit, which oftentimes can have very large, high tonnage and relatively high grade deposits of various metals. So looking for a porphyry is sort of something that's very front and center when you're dealing with a skarn type deposit. So what we're going to do is we're going to first focus on the Desert Scheelite Parallel West Zone. And what we're going to show here is a plan view of some of the survey results covering this area here. And it's important to note that we did the IP geophysics over existing known mineralization. The reason that this is important is because what we can do is we can essentially map in 3D the mineralized ore body or the mineralized body of rock, and then compare that to the exact geophysical signature that is associated with the known mineralization. And then by doing that, we take that exact same geophysical signature and look for it elsewhere on the property. Because we're in the same geological terrain, if we see the exact same or very similar geophysical signature elsewhere in the property, it leads us to believe that we're going to find the same skarn type alteration and mineralization at the location where that geophysical signature is found. So we're going to show you a depth slice of the IP data because we did a 3D survey. So we're going to essentially slice through the Earth at 75 meters depth. And that's important because at 75 meters is a major zone of mineralization at Desert Scheelite, our main zone and deposit area at Pilot Mountain. So we're going to slice down to 75 meters, and I'll show you why we're so excited about this Desert Scheelite Parallel West zone. So that's it here. So once again, this is the original, or this is the current Desert Scheelite zone. So all of the drilling that I showed you on the previous map is essentially concentrated within this area here. And we've been able to, or the previous operator was able to prove up 10.7 million tons at 0.26 tungsten trioxide. This area alone would constitute the largest undeveloped tungsten resource in the US. You can see the scale bar here. It's about almost 400 or 500 meters in strike length. However, this is the zone that we're really excited about because, as you can see, in terms of the resistivity on the bottom right here, it has the identical, that dark blue, which is less than 20 ohm meters, identical geophysical signature that we're seeing at the Desert Scheelite zone. However, this zone has never been drill tested. So if you just look at the sheer size of this zone compared to the main ore body or the main mineralized zone at Desert Scheelite and at Pilot Mountain, you can understand why this newly discovered anomaly is a very exciting development for the company. So obviously we need to go and prove with drilling RC or diamond that this zone is indeed being caused by the same skarn type tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc mineralization that we're seeing at Desert Scheelite. But this is a very significant development for the obvious reasons here, and just by looking at the sheer size of this anomaly. And on top of that, we have access roads to this, so in terms of being able to permit, it'd be relatively straightforward to permit this area. So that's the first area. I'm going to just zoom back out here. Now we're going to focus on the porphyry depth zone. As I mentioned, we're looking for a potential porphyry deposit. Now, a porphyry has a different geophysical signature than a skarn zone. So when we're looking for the porphyry or potential causative porphyry at Pilot Mountain, what we're looking for is a chargeability high and a resistivity high, which is different than the skarn type zone I just showed you. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to turn on another depth slice here. So this is, if we're going to pull it up, this is chargeability at about 300 meters depth. And this area, and just to confirm here, so this outline that you see here is the area that was targeted with the 2022-2023 survey. And as you can see here, there's a very large and sizable chargeability anomaly that's now connecting up Good Hope to Desert Scheelite, which has never been done before. These were two isolated zones, and now we're showing at depth here that we have what appears to be some sort of porphyry or some sort of intrusive because it has a chargeability high and resistivity high signature. So once again, you know, what we're doing here successfully is we're showing that there potentially is some sort of mineralized connection or some sort of zone or geological similarities between the Good Hope and Desert Scheelite. So that opens up a very large area here, 1.4, 1.3 kilometers that has really never been looked at. And now we're seeing that these two, what were previously isolated zones, are potentially connected up at depth, which is obviously a very significant development as well. I'm going to quickly flip back to the results from that were presented in the RNS, which includes both your resistivity and your chargeability. So once again, here, now what we're doing now is we're slicing through the Earth. So you'll see here, this represents the cross-section line that we're looking at. So before we were looking in plan view at the chargeability, now we've sliced through the Earth and we're looking at that same zone. As you can see here, it's sort of concave up, connecting up the Good Hope and Desert Scheelite zones. And once again, there's your chargeability high in terms of milliseconds, about 20 to 25 milliseconds, which is very chargeable. Typically, chargeable rocks have disseminated sulfides. That's what causes them to, or can cause them to be chargeable. The discovery of this porphyry depth zone is almost a validation of our original idea, which was that these four zones are connected up in some way. So now we have this chargeability high and resistivity high feature, which is a very exciting target for us to hopefully show the continuity between these two isolated zones, which could allow us to really expand quite rapidly the mineralizing footprint at Pilot Mountain. And then looking at the last zone here, so if you look on our corporate presentation, you'll see one of the highlight intercepts that was drilled by a historic operator, which was essentially stepping out on desert scheelite. So once again, this main zone here was stepping out towards the east, and some of the strongest mineralization ever found on the property was drilled as these holes stepped out to the east. So the postulation or the idea was that potentially this desert scheelite zone could continue to extend further towards the east. And once again, as I mentioned previously, in 2012, they did a detailed survey over this area. And I've highlighted, I'm just going to turn off this geophysics, but I've highlighted effectively where this new zone effectively lies. I'm going to flip to our website once again, and there it is. So you'll see these are all the desert scheelite drill holes. So we have 10.7 million tons at 0.26. You can see it's this east-west trending mineralized body. And as mentioned, some of these furthest east drill holes. So what we're doing is as we're going down the screen, we're going further towards the east. But some of these drill holes here return some of the strongest tungsten and copper mineralization ever found on the property. And as you can see here, it's the same feature. So it's a resistivity low feature. As you can see, it extends towards the east here. Now this extends for approximately 500 meters and then approximately terminates here. But this whole zone here, as you can see, very similar signature to what you're seeing here. It dips under cover slightly, but that zone has not been tested by drilling. So that's another very exciting target here because we could potentially extend the mineralized body at Desert Scheelite, which is the main zone, not only to the west with the newly discovered zone, but also to the east as well, over 500 meters. And just as another note, the current strike length is about 500 meters. So if we were successful in extending it for another 500 meters, obviously that's a very significant development at the property. So I'm going to flip back to the outline here. Hopefully that provides a bit of extra context as to what we're seeing here and why we're so excited about these three targets. I apologize, it's a bit of a technical story, but I potentially could release further notes about these three exploration targets and also do a Q&A in the future to hopefully allow investors to ask any follow-up questions. But hopefully this helps. We're looking forward to pushing exploration forward at Pilot Mountain. We're also looking to advance discussions and push forward our award strategy on this project with the very strategic in-ground resource that we have right now. So stay tuned for further updates. Keep an eye on our Twitter or visit our website at goldenmetalresources.com.